For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Ipsos Social Research and Corporate Reputation Specialist Marie Harris discusses Ipsos polling for the 2016 local government elections. Ipsos' recent pre-election polls indicated that the DA may have more support than the ANC in some important areas, and it has caused a stir. What exactly are your polls saying about levels of political party support in the three metros, Johannesburg, Tshwane, and Nelson Mandela Bay?
Sunny, what we did for the ENCA is in the 2 months before the election, we recruited a panel of voters, and they were all from the three mainly contested metros, Joburg, Tshwane and Nelson Mandela Bay. We asked them questions every Monday and Tuesday, did all the weighting of the results and the data processing on the Wednesday, and then published on the Thursday. I think it's very important to explain that the purpose of these polls for ENCA was to measure the level of support, obviously, but also look at how local things influence the elections. And we definitely saw that in Tshwane, for instance. Just after the mayoral candidate was announced, there was a lot of unrest, and we could see the support for the ANC going down. However, well, as we said throughout this process, these things are indications. They are not predictions. They were indications of what happened every week in the metro. What we did also in July, beginning of July, was a study that we did countrywide based on face-to-face in-home interviews. The ENCA study was done on mobile phones. And then we looked over this weekend, past weekend, we looked at all the results we had. The results from the countrywide study, the results from the metropolitan areas that we did for ENCA. We manipulated the results of the national study to reflect the views of registered voters. As you know, there are 26.3 million people registered to vote. So we looked at all three of those things and came up with what you can call a prediction for the elections. And if we look nationally, it looks as if the ANC will get about 54% of the national vote, the DA about 26% of the national vote, and the EFF between 8 and 9% of the national vote. If we then look at the three areas, the three mainly contested areas, in Nelson Mandela Bay, the DA is still comfortably ahead. We think they will, or they might, win the metro in the end, and I'm reading you the results here. The DA is getting 44% of the vote, looking at all three studies. The ANC is 37% of the vote, and the EFF 6%. In the city of Joburg and the city of Tshwane, we say it's too close to call. Throughout this whole process, we said there are about between, say, 13 to 20% of voters who haven't made up their minds. Obviously, we have worked over this weekend to figure out where these people are going to draw their crosses on Wednesday. And we came up with the city of Tshwane, 47% for the ANC, 43% for the DA, 9% for the EFF, and Joburg 46% for the ANC, 41% for the DA, and 8% for the EFF. We think it will be a very close run election in the city of Joburg. The city of Tshwane, we think because of the importance of the capital, of the wonderful election machine the ANC has. In the last 2 weeks especially, we saw a resurgence of ANC support in Tshwane. It is possible that they will win Tshwane in the end.
How accurate do you think your predictions will prove to be? Can you explain the methodology you used and your sample size?
Yes, I can. When we look at these results on the national study, we do about 4,000 interviews. Obviously, in each of these metros, it is not as many. In Johannesburg, it's just over 1,000. In Pretoria, it was about 700. And in Nelson Mandela Bay, it was about 300 interviews that we did, just roughly what we did. We need to keep in mind that surveys are not exact in an exact science. There's always a margin of error. this margin of error is influenced by the sample size, not by the size of the universe, by the sample size, the methodology used, and we used random sampling throughout, and also by the response rate. I don't know how accurate we will be when come Wednesday and the 48 hours after that, but I can tell you that in the 2014 national election our prediction was exactly on target as far as the national result was concerned. And in the 2011 elections, if we look at the national result, not per area, we were also, I think, 1% off or something like that. So depending on how you read these things, they can be very, very accurate.
What is the role of the pre-election polling? Why do you think it's important?
I think it's very important as people pre an election are confronted with a lot of coverage in the media. They're also confronted with a lot of interest from political parties. And polls are like an independent view. This is what people like you say or think or whatever. So what the goal of doing these polls is to inform South Africans how other people like them think and feel about issues. The influence of polls on election results is actually very slim because it's only one of the sources of information that people use.
Your polling has indicated that the ANC will face tough competition on August 3. What were some of the reasons you received from your participants that gave an indication that the ANC is not going to enjoy an outright victory?
The reasons that people came up with was that they say that the ANC makes a lot of promises and it doesn't always deliver on the promises. People are also unhappy with service delivery issues. We can see that. I mean, if we just look at the number of service delivery protests. There was also, since the beginning of the year, in every poll we did, a strong expression that people did not have a high level of trust in the leadership of the ANC, specifically President Zuma. Then obviously with the local elections, that's the closest form of government to the electorate in the end, and people are feeling that it is sometimes safe, to put that in inverted commas, to vote for an opposition party in a local election, whereas you would still vote for the party or the main party of your choice in a national or provincial election.
Do your polls indicate whether support for the DA is growing amongst black voters?
Yes, definitely. Obviously not in the rural areas. The ANC is extremely strong in the rural areas, and I think it's understandable because a lot of people never read a newspaper, they never watch the news, and the only politicians they ever see are ANC politicians. And really the other parties perhaps do not have the resources to campaign very much in the rural areas. But if we look specifically at the metropolitan areas, there is a growing support for the DA and other opposition parties amongst, let's say, amongst the middle class of all population groups, but specifically black people.
The EFF will be contesting for the first time during the upcoming local government elections. How well did they do during your polling?
They got about between 8 and 10% in most cases. Not bad. I do think they will be improving on the proportion of the vote they got in the 2014 elections. This election nationally, I think they will do better than that. And then I also have to say that specifically looking at provincial results in the Limpopo province, the EFF will do really well. I think about a quarter of the voters or something like that have indicated that they will vote EFF in the local government election in Limpopo.
How do you predict that smaller parties are likely to perform?
I do think with a big focus on the three big parties, if we just say ANC, DA and EFF, a lot of the smaller parties are actually marginalized and pushed to the sides. But we do see in Johannesburg that the IFP will probably get 1 or 2 percentage points support. In Pretoria, the ACDP is not doing that badly, 1% of support. And then in Nelson Mandela Bay, the UDM is getting quite a bit of support. In Nelson Mandela Bay, however, it's also the unknown factor of the United Front, the NUM-sponsored party, and nobody knows really what's going to happen with that new player on the block in Nelson Mandela Bay.
Do you think that the upcoming local government elections are going to be the most closely contested elections South Africa has ever seen since 1994?
I do think so. You know, for a long time our elections, and I hesitate to say this, but our elections have become a little bit boring because the results were almost always in the same ballparks. And really this time there's a different element. We picked up when we did field work, and throughout this process, the face-to-face interviews we did, the telephone interviews we did, we really picked up something different. So I do think South Africans are probably becoming more politically literate on the one side, and on the other side, they are really, we spoke about this earlier, a feeling that the government is not always delivering on what it's promising. So, and I do think that's a different element coming into these elections. But importantly, there's about 10 million people who are eligible to vote, who are 18 years or older, and South Africans who have not registered to vote. So I do think that's important to keep in mind, that for a lot of people, politics just does not make any sense.
That was Ipsos Social Research and Corporate Reputation Specialist Marie Harris speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about Ipsos polling for the 2016 upcoming local government elections.